Well, the Brickyard 400 is officially back, and it had a lot to talk about after yesterday's race. Hey there, race fans. It's Race Day Top 5 with me, Frank 5. Indianapolis Motor Speedway, one of the most iconic racetracks in the world. It plays host to the Indianapolis 500 during Memorial Day weekend, and this time of the year, NASCAR makes its trip to the Indianapolis Speedway, and this time we return to the oval configuration and return to the historic race known as the Brickyard 400, a race that we started back in 1994 when Jeff Gordon won the inaugural race, and since then we've had many drivers achieve glory of winning at this famous track, and of course getting the chance to kiss the bricks, the yard of bricks at the start-finish line, a tradition started by Dale Jarrett in 1996. And this year, we returned to the Oval where we had a lot of interesting storylines, and a major storyline is who won the race after experiencing a massive moment here in May. Let's get into all that went down in Indianapolis. Number 1, Larson captures another crown jewel. Kyle Larson gets his first ever Brickyard 400 victory, winning yesterday's race, beating out Tyler Reddick, Ryan Blaney, Christopher Bell, and Bubba Wallace for the victory. A big win for Kyle Larson at this famous track. If you remember earlier in the year, Kyle Larson was actually running in Indianapolis during the month of May because he was participating to run the Indianapolis 500 for Team Arrow McLaren in association with Hendrick Motorsports with HendrickCars.com in the car. And he had been fast the entire time that week leading up to the big race, where he was so strong in the practice sessions, so strong in qualifying. He made it to the Firestone Fast 6, had a chance at the pole, didn't get it, but still did a very good job nonetheless, and was very, very excited about the big day because he was going to try to attempt the double, run the Indianapolis 500, and then make it back to Charlotte in time for the Coca-Cola 600. However, that was not the case as Mother Nature played havoc and delayed the start of the Indianapolis 500, and Larson decided to stay and run the entire Indy 500 and miss the start of the Coca-Cola 600. And Larson was so good in the Indianapolis 500. He was strong all day, was learning every single lap, and it looked like he was going to have a chance to possibly contend for the win late, but in the latter part of the race with about 50 laps to go, he got caught for speeding on pit road, ultimately taking him out of contention. But he still finished on the lead lap in the top 20 and completed all 500 miles of the race. It was a pretty solid accomplishment for him. However, again, because of that, he missed the start of the 600. He did fly back to Charlotte and was able to land at the speedway and get back inside the infield to have a chance to get back in the car and try to run the rest of the race. But at that time, the weather started to come down, and after that, we were never able to get back going. But because of the attempt to get back to the 600, that's why NASCAR was able to grant Kyle Larson a waiver for missing that race. And in his return to Indianapolis in a stock car, he captured another crown jewel. And yesterday, he had a really good race car running up front for a good part of the race. Didn't really showcase a lot of it because sometimes he would get off strategy. He would fall back in the pack and would try to work his way back up. Of course, it was a little tough to pass out there as it normally is here in Indianapolis for a stock car. But despite that, later in the race, when everybody was on differing strategies where guys were staying out thinking they could try to save enough fuel to make it the rest of the way, Larson was one of a few cars that elected to come down pit road before a caution came out for Martin Truex Jr. wrecking in turn 3. They were able to come down pit road, get their tires and fuel, and Larson restarted 23rd. And in the final 30 laps, he was the fastest car out there, passing guys like I couldn't believe. And a track, again, where it's tough to pass, he made the most of it. Now, granted, a lot of those guys that he was passing were trying to save as much fuel as they possibly could to make it to the end of the race in case we didn't get a late race caution. But Larson was able to pass them methodically and pass some key contenders late that he felt like he needed to be in front of to have a chance to win this race in case some guys ran out of gas. And he was able to catch up to the top 4 with about 10 laps to go, and then found himself in 3rd place, hunting down Brad Keselowski and Ryan Blaney. It looked like Larson was more than likely not going to be able to get there because he was, once he got up there, again, tough to pass the top 2, but fate was able to, or shall I say, luck turned his way when with 2 laps to go. Kyle Busch, running inside of Denny Hamlin for 5th place, went around bringing out the caution and thus setting up a double file restart. And as we were coming to green, Larson looked like he was going to restart 3rd, but then the 6th car of Brad Keselowski, who was really close on fuel and realized that he wasn't going to have enough to make it the last 2 laps, dove onto pit road in the entire inside lane advance up forward, and that put Larson in the front row next to Ryan Blaney. He got a nice restart next to him. People are probably thinking he jumped it a little bit. I'll talk about that later, but Larson was able to take the lead and hold it into turn 1 just as a wreck occurred right behind him, and then we had to stop the race with a red flag. We got the race going with the last 2-lap dash. Larson was able to get by the 12 of Ryan Blaney and drove away from the field. And while he did that, coming off of turn 2, a wreck happened behind him with Ryan Preece hitting the inside wall. And Larson was able to come around. He took the white flag, and just moments after he did, NASCAR threw the caution flag, thus ending the race and giving Kyle Larson the win. I mean, he definitely had the best car at the end of that race, being able to pass those guys that were trying to save as much fuel to make it to the end. And I'm really exciting for Kyle Larson, because what could have been earlier this year if he completed the double, if he did run the Indianapolis 500 and the Coke 600, if the Indy 500 did not get delayed due to weather. It could have been a historic day for Kyle Larson, and the fans were cheering him on when he did the burnouts and when he came across the start-finish line as the winner, and just talking to the crowd through the television, network and everything, and the radio. Everybody was cheering him on because they know how exciting he is, how entertaining he is when he straps into a race car, no matter what type of car it is, whether it be a stock car, an open wheel car, or a sprint car on dirt. He's so much fun to watch. And he pegged the question to the fans, you want me to come back here next year and try the double again? And they cheered at him so loudly as a sign of saying, yes, they want him back. And I definitely think he will be back next year. Now, will it be with Team McLaren and Hendrick Motorsports combined together? We'll see. I think it's the most logical decision for them to do. But Larson adds another crown jewel to his racing resume, and he also took back the championship lead in the regular season standings right now from his teammate Chase Elliott based on Larson's victory yesterday versus where his teammate finished back in 10th. But another one for Larson gives him more bonus points and more momentum as we head into the brief 2-week break, and then we get back to the final 4 races before the playoffs. There's no denying if Kyle Larson can get those 15 extra bonus points, carry that into the postseason, he could be setting his sights right away towards Phoenix to have a chance to compete for his 2nd championship. But another crown jewel added to his name, and gives Hendrick Motorsports another one at the Brickyard. An awesome accomplishment by Kyle Larson, the 5 team. So congrats to him and Cliff Daniels and the 5 team. A big win at Indianapolis yesterday. Number 2, controversy. We had a lot of that yesterday regarding 4 things. The finish of the race being called due to a yellow flag. The restart prior to that, blend line violations, and television changes. Let's start first with the finish of the race. So as I mentioned, Kyle Larson took the lead going on the last overtime restart, and as he happened off of turn 2, Ryan Preece ran out of gas and wrecked on the back straightaway, but NASCAR did not throw the caution at the time because everybody had cleared him, and they were monitoring the 41 to see could he get the car back rolling. Even at a reduced speed, he could still limp it around that we could finish the last lap under green and not have a yellow flag. Well, as Larson took the white flag and cleared it, and NASCAR saw that the 41 couldn't move at all, despite barely trying, it wasn't able to go at all. NASCAR decided to throw the yellow and ultimately end the race. And a lot of people on social media are saying, they rate this for the 5 car. They rate this for Kyle Larson, of course. No, they did not rate this race. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear it was rigged, it was rigged, it was rigged. Let's stop that, please. NASCAR was monitoring the 41 to see if there was a chance if he could get the car back going and get it moving. But unfortunately, he couldn't. And of course, Ryan Preece came out on social media today and explained, coming off of turn 2, before I got wrecked, I ran out of gas. I ran out of fuel. I got bumped from behind because I was out of fuel and couldn't really put much throttle into it. That's why he got sent around, and that's why he probably couldn't refire the car and get it back going, because he was out of gas, and without gas, he can't really go anywhere. So that's kind of clears up the confusion as to why people are questioning NASCAR's decision to throw the caution literally after Larson crossed the start-finish line, putting us on the last lap. So that explains a lot. I know people are still frustrated about it because now we've had 3 crown jewel races this year end under yellow, with the Daytona 500 ending under yellow, not able to get the 600 back underway due to all the wet weather and the hot humidity preventing us from drying the track completely, and the finish of yesterday's race. But unfortunately, it's how it is, and don't really point the finger at NASCAR because they were just, again, monitoring the 41 to see could he get back going, and he didn't. So it is what it is. Now, the second controversy would be The restart prior to that, the restart where Keselowski dove onto pit road as he ran out of gas, everybody's questioning, well, Larson moves up in the inside, and Blaney then becomes the control car because the guy that comes in as the race leader and is pitting because he's out of gas, the guy on the outside becomes the control car. But if you noticed a little bit, Larson got a little smidge ahead of Ryan Blaney as they crossed the restart zone, and a lot of people are thinking that Larson should have been penalized for that, but they didn't see it that way according to NASCAR, and I don't think Larson technically jumped the start because it wasn't like a big launch ahead of the 12 car. But I understand there were some people frustrated about it, but there's not really much you could do, especially when the guy peeling off as the leader because he's out of gas, and it puts the guy on the outside in the control for the restart. You really can't say much about that. It's just how it goes. Now, the third controversy of the race yesterday was blend line violations. Of course, this is the first time back on the oval since 2020, and we haven't had pit stops of guys coming off the pit lane in turn one on the x-axis of the track, the apron of the racetrack, heading off into turn number 2, and then coming off of turn number 2, we can blend back on the racetrack. Well, yesterday, 2 drivers were penalized by that blend line violation, and they were Chase Elliott and Brad Keselowski. Now, what happened with Chase Elliott is he's leaving pit road, he starts to dart back up across the racetrack above the white line, and then dove down to the axis where he's supposed to go to come back onto the racetrack. What NASCAR saw in their eyes is that what he did was that he made a violation of blending above that white line and going onto the racing groove. They felt like it's a risk, it's a danger, and that's why they penalized the 9 car for it. Chase Elliott obviously was not happy about that and basically came on the radio and said, this is not what they sent out to us in the ruling as far as how you blend back onto the racetrack here at Indianapolis when coming off of pit road. Obviously, a lot of people were wondering what's his argument about. Well, as you could tell as he's coming back on the track, he's not necessarily running on the racing line. That's further up towards the wall and between the middle of turns 1 and 2. That's what Chase's argument was, that he felt like that he should have been penalized for that. And as you could tell behind him, Kyle Larson, the eventual winner of the race, is following behind. He only touches the white line with his right side tires, doesn't put all 4 tires above that white line. But NASCAR saw the 9-car penalty, felt like was justified and penalized him for it. The same thing happened to Brad Keselowski a little bit later when he was making his pit stop. And even though it was a very controversial moment for both those guys, they both were able to recover somewhat and get back in the conversation to have a chance to win the Brickyard 400. But a lot of people are still, puzzled about what that blend line violation, what it really, is a blend line violation. Is it really? He didn't come back onto the racing service right into the pathway of guys coming that way because they're up towards closer to the wall. They're not like literally down towards that white line through the middle of 1 and 2 because you got to run that high side for that extra grip and momentum to carry yourself into turn 2, heading down the back straightaway. So I don't know what the how the blend line violation, could be justified moving forward and everything, but it definitely was made Chase Elliott very unhappy yesterday, even though he was able to somewhat recover from it. But it's a really, really interesting penalty decision right there. And the final controversy I have is television changes, as far as changing from the network station to cable station back to network and Vision and cable. I'm talking about NBC. Yesterday's race was covered on the NBC network. Of course, a pivotal race, a crown jewel race, has to be on one of the biggest network televisions that is covering NASCAR during this portion of the season, NBC. And we were so excited for the hype and everything. And as pre-race ceremonies get underway, a breaking news developing story happened. Of course, if you saw the telecast yesterday, I won't go into further details. I'm not getting political. We all know what happened yesterday. I'm not going to talk about that at all. But it happened, and NASCAR had to pretty much divert its coverage taken away from the moment during pre-race ceremonies on NBC and had it turned over to cable network USA Network, which is an NBC affiliate. And a lot of people were really upset about that, thinking, we want to watch racing in the pre-race ceremonies at one of the most historic tracks in the world, not hear about what's going on in the political stance of the world right now. So, a lot of people on social media were lining up about that. But just as NASCAR cars were beginning to make their way onto the track for the pace laps, USA was able to switch coverage back to NBC for the race, and we were able to see the start of the race on the NBC network. And it was really, refreshing to see get back on television on that network for the start of the race, and the majority of the race was run on it. But late in the race, we had that wreck in the first overtime, and it got put into a red flag situation, NBC and NASCAR made the decision that we're not going to finish this race on NBC. We're going to finish it over on our cable network in USA. Now, my problem with that is NBC is a network channel where a lot of people tune in for events such as like your sporting events like Sunday Night Football or the Olympics that will be covered on NBC next week, and of course some of the NASCAR races. A lot of people are, really don't like watching races on cable, which we've gone in a direction the past couple years with Fox Sports 1, with the Fox affiliates, and USA with the NBC network, especially because NBC Sports closed down after 2020 or 2020 due to the pandemic and everything. I get a lot of people are frustrated. I was frustrated too. I did not want to see the race, end on USA Network. I felt like it should have stayed on NBC because in past years we've seen the NBC network stay committed to cup races that they're covering and carry them further past the scheduled distance. Of course, for an example, NBC's first race back in NASCAR in 2015. They had a race delayed from the start because of the weather, and we had to wait a while, but we eventually got the race underway almost at 11:30 at night, and NBC stayed with the race all the way until 3:30 a.m. in the morning. I stayed up that entire night and watched it on NBC. They didn't change to a different network at the time. Same goes for the race in 2005, at Daytona, and it was a night race. Weather delayed the start of the thing. We got the race going at 10:45, and NBC stayed onto that race the entire time all the way until 2 a.m. in the morning. I know a lot of people are going to say, well, it's because NBC had to be loyal to talking about the developing story going on in the world right now. Well, okay, but we don't want that. We want to see race cars. So please, NBC, try to stay loyal to the NASCAR fans watching the product on the NBC network and don't shift off to another storyline, please, next time. I mean, I'm not part of the production team. I just wish it didn't happen yesterday. But those controversies pretty much all covered the Brickyard 400 yesterday. Number 3, contenders coming up short or fading late. A lot of guys had a good chance to win that Brickyard 400 yesterday. Let's kick it off with a runner-up in Tyler Reddick. I mean, these last couple of weeks, he's been so close. He should have at least 4 wins by now. Tyler Reddick had a very good race car yesterday. Started on the pole, led the most laps, was very, very strong at the beginning of the race. Didn't win stage number 1 because he pitted a little bit later versus other guys that pitted before him. He was able to still get some good amount of stage points and help him get closer and closer to this regular season championship battle with Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott. But Reddick for most of the day was, also at times trying to play catch up and get back some of his track position because at times it fluctuated back and forth. He had a penalty actually to kick off the final stage or in the middle of the final stage towards the end of the race because he had a speeding penalty when he made his pit stop under green flag conditions, and therefore had to restart at the back of the field, and it felt like it was going to be a big challenge for him to try to get back up there. But like Kyle Larson, Reddick himself was able to fight his way through the field through those guys that were trying to save as much fuel as they possibly could to make it to the end. And Reddick found himself following Larson, then fell behind him a little bit, but still was in the top 10 and had a good chance to finish the race well inside the top 5 yesterday. And of course, he ended up with a second place finish. Tried everything he could to catch Kyle Larson that last lap, just wasn't enough. He's a little bummed about being the second place finisher at the Brickyard, a track where everybody wants to win at. But still, it's a really good result for Tyler Reddick and the 45 team. They are definitely one of the top favorites right now in the Cup Series. And then we have last week's winner from Pocono, Ryan Blaney, finishing in 3rd place. It looked like he was going to be in prime position to win yesterday's race, even though he had a close moment in the final stage when he got involved in a little bit of a, chaotic bunch going into turn 1 after getting bumped by Carson Hocevar, nearly getting turned, and then correcting it, even though he came down and collected poor Jimmy Johnson and knocked him into the wall and collected Blaney's teammate Joey Logano. Blaney was able to continue on and still had a very good race car. And of course, he, like many others, was trying to save as much fuel as he possibly could so he could make it to the end of the race. When Keselowski came down pit road, coming into that first overtime restart, as I mentioned, Blaney became the control car. But I guarantee he was not really happy about seeing the 5 car getting a little bit ahead of him when they came out of that restart zone, heading to the start-finish line and then into turn 1 before that wreck happened behind him. Blaney was the control car, but once Larson got by, he became the leader, and Blaney was not able to get back by him and fell back on the final restart, finishing in 3rd place. Still a good result for Blaney, but I think he probably is still a little bit bummed about it because he felt like he could have had a chance to be the winner of the Brickyard had he been the control car, and if NASCAR somehow maybe penalized the 5 for maybe making a little bit of a jump on that restart that would have taken him out of contention. But what are you going to do? It's a third place finish nonetheless for Ryan Blaney and the number 12 team. Then we go to Chase Elliott, as I mentioned, Kyle Larson's teammate, who was penalized for that blend line violation in stage 1. And early on in that stage, he was fast, and he was catching leader Tyler Reddick towards the middle of that stage. It looked like he had the car capable of competing with him, just like he did last week with the Toyotas at Pocono, until that late race pit road speeding penalty took him out of contention. I'm baffled by that decision by NASCAR. I don't think he really sped, and I don't think Larson sped last week either. But Elliott, after the blend line violation, got penalized, had to serve his pass-through. He was not happy on the radio. He was not able to accumulate any stage points in stage 1. In stage 2, he was still trying to play a little bit of catch-up after the penalty, but was able to take a gamble and stay out towards the end of stage 2, and was challenging Bubba Wallace for the race lead, was not able to get by him, but still was able to finish second place and get 9 stage points to help him in his battle for the regular season title. So that helped him. Then he got off strategy a little bit, and then towards the middle of the final stage, he looked like he was going to be in prime position. If things had gone green the rest of the way, he would be in contention, maybe ahead of Kyle Larson and Tyler Reddick when they made their green flag pit stops, and knowing that they had enough fuel to go the rest of the way. Of course, the caution came out for the Truex wreck. He found himself deep in the pack, and unlike the 5 and the 45, Elliott couldn't really pass anybody because it was a little tough with those guys back there saving fuel. And the deeper you are in traffic, again, the harder it is to pass. But once some of those guys came down pit road because they were close on fuel, he kept advancing himself further. Of course, he did bump the back of the 41 at the very end of the race, even though the 41 was running out of gas when that happened. Elliott still came away with a 10th place finish. He did lose the regular season championship lead, being down by only 10 points, but still in the mix. And going into the 2-week break, with the top 5 he's accumulated, the top 10s that he has, being consistent all year long, of course, to win at Texas, he's still in the mix. I still think he's one of the top dogs. But they got to get back some of that winning speed if they're going to have a chance to really make a run in these playoffs. Then we have Brad Keselowski, of course. He, like Elliott, penalized for the blend line violation in stage number 1. He fell a lap down, but after a couple more cautions that we had at the beginning of stage 2, he got his lap back, and he was still trying to play catch up the rest of the race. And in the final stage, he found himself inside the top 10. And then after the caution for Truex, he became the control car with 30-plus laps to go. And he was pretty much backing the field up because he knew that he was really, really, really going to be on the edge. I mean, some guys, we knew Larson, Reddick, and those guys could make it on fuel. Blaney, Denny Hamlin at the time, Kyle Busch, those guys were kind of close, but I felt like they could make it at the very end had they saved enough fuel and it had gone green all the way to the checkers. Keselowski, on the other hand, I felt like was going to have to pit with about 10 laps to go in the race because he was cutting it close. But even because the fuel window here was like 45 to 48 laps, he was still out there saving fuel, and the top 2 behind him, the 2 guys behind him couldn't pass him. He was saving as much fuel as he could. Remember, Brad Keselowski is a really good race car driver when it comes to saving fuel and winning races. It's happened to him before in his tenure at Penske. It looked like maybe if he had gone 60 laps on fuel and won this race, you got to give him and Matt McCall a big attaboy for that moment. But unfortunately, with the caution coming out late with the 8 car of Kyle Busch wrecking, Keselowski was in the position thinking, can I make it the rest of the way on fuel? We'll see. But he was able to be the control car for the restart, but then, as I mentioned, dove down pit road because he felt like he did not have enough for an overtime restart to make it the rest of the way. We had that wreck late, and then, of course, the caution on the last lap. He ended up coming home 20th place. If we had finished the race at regular scheduled distance and he'd won that race, that'd been a pretty big accomplishment. But just fell a little too short yesterday, especially on fuel. And then we have Denny Hamlin, who said at the beginning of this race, he and Chris Gabor, his crew chief, were going to do whatever it took to win this race, because this is the one crown jewel missing on Denny Hamlin's resume. He's won Daytona 500, Southern 500, and Coke 600, but not the Brickyard 400. At times yesterday, it definitely looked like he was going to be able to win the race. He won stage 1. He definitely had a really good race car. Late in the race, of course, one of those guys trying to save fuel was kind of on the cusp. It felt like maybe it was going to work out his way until the guys behind him, like Larson and Reddick, had better fuel and better tires, blew by him. Pretty much at that point was done. He was part of the Kyle Busch wreck that set up the last 2 overtime restarts, and then Gabe Hart in the race said, Denny, we're not going to be able to make it. Come down pit road, put the fuel in, and we'll see what we can do from there. But unfortunately, he was part of that wreck on the first overtime restart where he got collected with John Hunter Nemechek, Alex Bowman, Chase Briscoe, and Daniel Hemrick. A tough day to end for Denny Hamlin, especially considering how good of a car he had. but he'll have to wait to win that Brickyard 400 next year. So a lot of the big names yesterday had a good chance to win the race, but some of them fell a little too short or fell a little too far behind. Number 4, playoff bubble. It's continuing to tighten up, folks. As I mentioned, last week it started to tighten up a little bit towards the end of Pocono race, but after yesterday, it's getting closer and closer and closer. Let's start it off with Bubba Wallace, who, of course, still remains on the outside right now, but yesterday he put himself in a solid position to gain a lot of those points and make up a lot of time on that cutoff line and had a good run yesterday. Running well for most of the race. He didn't qualify that particularly well, but once he got his track position, particularly in stage 2, he was able to control the rest of that stage and got the stage win the first time since, I think, 2022 was the last time he won a stage. Been quite a while for him. But that was able to give him more points to close up the points gap between separating himself and Ross Chastain. Bubba felt like he probably could have had a car to win yesterday, but he made some mistakes late and tried to rally as best he could. He ended up getting a 5th place finish to mention, but he felt like maybe just needed a little bit too more, and he said we need to go to work if we're going to have some winning speed like our teammate Tyler Reddick has right now. But a top 5 was really good for Bubba Wallace, considering where his other competitors for that bubble were. Ross Chastain ended up finishing inside the top 15. He led at one point early in the final stage on a restart, but he was on different strategy. He wasn't a top 5, top 10 car yesterday. I think the track position really helped his car at the time, but when he got deep in the pack, he just couldn't really go anywhere. But he was able to dodge a lot of the chaos late in the race and get a 15th place finish out of it. Then Chris Buescher, who had a really good run last week at Pocono, yesterday did not have the best of luck. He had a problem in his pit stop in stage 1 and then had to pit a little bit later because he had a left rear tire go down. He fell laps down and was never really in the mix at all yesterday. He did get all of his laps back, but it was a little too late and ended up finishing, I think, in 21st. And then Ty Gibbs, who last week had an engine failure late and fell out of the race and wasn't able to finish. Yesterday, running up at the front of the field in the top 10, I think had top 15 speed with him. Late in the race, engine starting to die on him. Another engine problem with the 54 team. They can't keep having these problems because now he's only 42 points above the cutoff line. If we get any new winners in the final 4 races before these playoffs start that are below him in points, Ty Gibbs is in trouble. I mean, they are literally falling behind right now, and they're losing points. Even with Martin Truex Jr.'s rugged races, they're still losing points to him to try to close that gap as far as who's going to be the highest on points in case we don't get any more than 16 winners, which we won't in these next 4 races. We get 4 new winners. We have 16 drivers locked in the playoffs. But, of course, you want to be one of those guys to win. Gibbs right now pretty much is still points racing, still trying to, of course, get his first win. But this engine failure the last 2 weeks is starting to hurt him now. And it's starting to tighten up at that playoff bubble. And with 4 races left these next 2 weeks to kind of recoup and regroup yourselves, these guys are going to be literally on the edge of their seat and fighting hard for everything they've got in these next 4 races before the playoffs start at Atlanta in September. So these guys have got a lot cut out for them these final 4 races. And number 5, the return of the Brickyard on the oval. Of course, the last couple of years, NASCAR ran in Indianapolis on the road course section and tried to experiment something and try to maybe make the racing a little more entertaining for, fan base in Indianapolis that's very loyal for the Indianapolis 500. But NASCAR the last couple of years has kind of lost, it's luxurious, it's importance in the sport, and a lot of it still has to do with still have not been able to get over the 2008 tire facade that happened, and it started to lose fans, and the attendance was going down. The racing wasn't really that good. There were a few of them that were fairly entertaining, like the fuel mileage raised at the end of the 2011 event, but other than that, it really hadn't been that much fun to watch. So NASCAR, after 2020, a year where we didn't have fans in attendance for that last Brickyard 400 on the oval at the time, we decided to go to the road course from 2021 to 2023. It had its rough moments with the curb coming up in 21, all the chaos that we had that year and the year after that as well. And, being pretty bland last year, even though we eliminated stage breaks, wasn't really that fun anymore. So NASCAR this year decided to bring the oval portion of the Brickyard back. And a lot of the fans were very happy about it. I mean, 70,000 people in attendance for the race estimated, even though the racetrack can hold a lot more than that for a NASCAR crowd. It's pretty good. I think it's really good. And it's a tradition. The oval part is the most important part, I think, of NASCAR racing at the Brickyard. Now, again, was the racing great yesterday? No, I mean, again, it's tough to pass. The restarts are a lot of fun, and I do think the strategy as far as changing it up once in a while between who's going to extend the stint versus who's going to pit a little bit, earlier in the run, and of course the guys at the end trying to save as much fuel as they possibly could to make it to the end made it a little more entertaining. I mean, the hype, around the Brickyard, let's see what we could do the next couple of years, putting this next-gen car on the oval. I mean, again, restarts were a lot of fun yesterday. I wasn't able to top the excitement that was the finish of the Xfinity race on Saturday because that was a thrilling ending, but still, it was good to see the Cup Series back on the oval yesterday. Another big storyline to announce that this weekend, Cole Custer, our defending Xfinity Series champion, announced that he will be returning to the Cup Series next year, driving for the Haas factory team. Of course, we all know Tony Stewart and Gene Haas are going to split as partners of the Stewart Haas racing team. Tony's going to go focus on other racing opportunities, but Gene Haas says, I'm still staying within the sport, and he's holding on to one of those charters that he still has right now, and is also still going to run 2 Xfinity teams next year. And on Saturday, he announced that Cole Custer, the defending Xfinity champion, who a few years ago was running in the Cup Series and won Rookie of the Year in 2020 while also winning the race at Kentucky, had kind of fallen off the last 2 years after that and thus got demoted back to Xfinity Series to try to build his confidence back, and I think it's definitely worked with winning some races, the championship, as I mentioned, winning last weekend's race at Pocono, almost winning this weekend's race at Indianapolis while being on pole. It's been a big week for Cole Custer, and I'm happy he's getting another chance in the Cup Series. And another important piece of information is that Haas said that they are staying with Ford next year. They'll still run the Dark Mustang, but they're going to have an alliance with Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing. I like that decision a lot because we've seen RFK has built back to being a very good race team now with winning some races with Buescher last year, Keselowski winning a race this year. Both have been very competitive. I like this decision by Gene Haas. I think it's going to help them. At the beginning, they might struggle a bit, but once they get further into the season and get well acclimated to the alliance with RFK, could still be fairly competitive. And I hope that for Gene, and I hope that for Cole Custer. So welcome back to Cup Series, Cole. Can't wait to have you back next year. Now, what to do these next 2 weeks because NASCAR is off. With the Olympics coming up next week, by the way, wish the best of them, luck to them and Team USA. I probably won't watch that much because I'm not a big fan of the Olympics. I do send my support to Team USA these next 2 weeks. But is next 2 weeks with NASCAR off? What are we going to do? I mean, maybe some of us will go do some fishing, go to the beach, go do some hunting in the woods, go camping with your families and everything, read a book, get outside, do some walking exercise, binge watch some televisions and movies, or heck, still keep up with NASCAR news because it never ends, folks. But that's what these next 2 weeks are going to be like. And then before you know it, we'll be back in action at the Commonwealth of Virginia in 2 weeks from 2 weeks in August 11th at Richmond Raceway. And that race will be very interesting because we're going to have 2 tire compounds. The regular tire, the yellow lettering that literally does not have much grip but can last long on the track. But we're also bringing the soft tire that we ran at the All-Star race at North Wilkesboro this year to try to improve, the difference, try to see what drivers could do as far as tire options that help their cars. The red lettering tire is the soft tire, means it has a lot of grip at the beginning, but it does fade a lot late. It doesn't last long. So that will be an interesting race in a few weeks. So what will happen after this 2 weeks as I'll take my time off and do my own stuff before we get back in action and get ready for these final 4 races before the playoffs start in September. Who will be on top when we resume from the break? Will it be Martin Truex Jr., the one where he felt like he should have had this earlier this year but got taken from him by his teammate Denny Hamlin? Or will somebody else that is below that cutoff line or is in that battle as far as the last spot in points goes, will one of them be able to punch their ticket to the playoffs with the win at Richmond in a few weeks? We'll wait and see, but I hope everybody has a good 2 weeks off from racing, enjoys the time off, and we can't wait to see NASCAR back in action at Richmond August 11th. So I hope you all have a good 2 week break from racing. Subscribe, like, congrats once again to Kyle Larson and the 5 team on their big win yesterday at Indianapolis. Have a great 2 weeks, everybody. Let's go racing.